Good morning, Christina. You are a clinical researcher and an entrepreneur who handles multiple ventures dedicated to children patient care, which is very unique what you are doing. And I wonder what led you to a career in medical.
Well, it's an interesting question. A lot of times people ask me this, even different colleagues that I've worked with over the years, because if you look at my degrees, I don't even have a science degree. I have a bachelor's in administration, as well as another business degree and a paralegal, ABA paralegal certificate. So basically, how this all came about was back when I was in my early 20s. And I was working as a mergers and acquisitions paralegal in this large building. And in that building, there were other companies. And there was a clinical research organization that was hiring. And the reason why I knew they were hiring was because one of the secretaries, the legal secretaries that worked with the paralegals, I became friends with. And she told me about this job at the CRO, and it was working on contracts. And so I can work on legal documents. I had the acclimate to do so. However, I did not know anything about the clinical research industry. But since I was a young child, I had watched my grandfather suffer over the years with various things. He had his first heart attack when he was 32 years old. He had a quadruple bypass. And so from that one surgery that he had with the quad bypass, he had to get blood transfusions. And at that time, they were not testing for hepatitis C. So he got hepatitis C then, which then shot into his liver, and he had cirrhosis of the liver, which typically people who have cirrhosis either were alcoholics or they had hepatitis. And so in his case, he had hepatitis. So from there, we just watched the journey that he was on, where he had leukemia, he was diagnosed with AML, and it just continued on. So this was my childhood, was watching my grandfather struggle constantly and watch the physicians try to figure out what was going on with him all the time. And then my dad's father, he died when I was 5 months old. He had a heart attack in his car and died. So it was kind of like, my grandparents and my grandmother on my dad's side also passed away when I was a freshman in high school from stage 4 liver, lung, stomach, ovarian cancer, which when we fast forward to 2015, my dad was diagnosed and died from liver, lung, stomach. Yeah, it went all the way through the same pathway. And he started with prostate. She started with ovarian. So you see how it was like all throughout my lifetime that I was fueled by seeing people get sick in my family and then myself in 2018.
I have to take a deep breath here. Oh my goodness. How do you deal with all that? Even as a child, that's a lot.
It was a whole lot. I remember, just watching my mom, which was my grandfather's wife, struggling. She had mental health issues also. So as a kid, I kind of was wondering, I noticed that there were some things, but I didn't know what exactly they were. The same thing with my mom. My mom also suffers from extreme mental health issues, and she had agoraphobia at one point in my childhood, and I had no idea. So we spent a lot of our time at home. Plus, we weren't very wealthy, so we couldn't afford to go on elaborate vacations. And even if we could, my mom couldn't leave the house. But as a child, we didn't know, I didn't know this. My brother who grew up with me, he didn't know. We didn't know until I got much older when I was graduating high school and found out because she couldn't come to my graduation because she couldn't leave the house. That was the first time I learned about that. So you see, it was just, I kind of became resilient to it all, good or bad. I think that perhaps I should have done some therapy earlier on in my lifetime to set me up for being more successful throughout some of these, journeys that we had and struggles as a family.
Yes, but look at it this way. Even then, you didn't went through all this therapy. I've seen a lot of children going through all these things at a young age, but you turn out just perfect.
Yeah.
So you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. But I always like to be transparent and say things that I could have done better. Like I have been very, very blessed to have the career I have today. I've worked really hard to get where I've gone. And I feel like partially the reason why I worked as hard as I have throughout the years was because I had seen it modeled early on with my father's work ethic as a blue collar man. And then a laborer, working and helping provide people with a voice in unions. And that's when he became president of the Steelworkers Union for a steel company that ended up going through bankruptcy 3 times and then finally closing their doors. And then he got a job on the Pennsylvania Turnpike and became a Teamster and then a negotiator on behalf of the employees that were Teamsters working on the Turnpike. So I saw all this stuff growing up, and my dad always modeled, like he worked really hard. He worked around the clock. He was working holidays and he never complained. He went to work. He did his job. And then once he finished his job, so to speak, from the blue collar standpoint, he was still managing all the labor disputes, the grievances, negotiating long-term contracts for their benefits, healthcare wise, pension wise. He was part of the group of people that got the ERISA Act passed down at the Hill years ago, so that when your father passed away, your mother would then be entitled to those benefits that he had. Prior to that, it would go back in the fund and your mom wouldn't be able to afford. I mean, who could afford to raise their children if they were thinking they were going to be living off of this pension because they stayed home and raised these children? And then all of a sudden, this money's going back in the pension fund? That's not right. These people worked for all that. They worked all those overtime hours and countless holidays.
So pretty much you fight for that and make sure that happened for them.
Yes. So now you kind of see the thread, right, of how I fight for patients' rights through my nonprofit, Affinity Patient Advocacy. I do that because I've always seen my father fighting for the benefit of people from a labor perspective. And then when he had his prostate cancer, he was only 40 when they removed his prostate. So he battled cancer 22 years until his death. It was a long journey. And from that time, from diagnosis, the first time I had moved, 5 years later to North Carolina, then to California, and then back from California when he came out of remission again in 2010. So it had been a struggle again as we were trying to, watch and see what we could do with him from a treatment perspective. I've worked heavily in oncology throughout my career, mostly because of my family's ailment.
So I'm thinking when you get with that job, you apply for it, you get that job, and that's how everything started, which is with your career.
Absolutely. It was my calling. It truly was. Helping patients is my calling. Helping people is my calling. Even with my personal brand that I started 2 years ago, I started that brand to empower people because, as you said early in the beginning of this discussion, I have accomplished a great deal. I have multiple companies. Yes. I work in healthcare primarily, biotech, pharmaceutical, and then obviously patient advocacy. But all of those things I was doing, I was suffering personally because I had married someone who was a domestic violence abuser, not knowing, obviously, that was the case when we first got together. It was something that I started seeing early on in the marriage after I got pregnant and was going to have our first child. So and so now I'm like thinking, well, I'm kind of stuck right here because I'm having a child. I don't want to run away from this. I've got to try to work on this and try to see what we can do to make this better, and I tried. And, after my dad passed in 2015, I saw a bigger change to the worse as far as the abuse was concerned because there was nobody watching anymore. My dad had passed away. I told you my mom has mental health issues. My mom doesn't really leave her house very often. It's not, she's not around. And I didn't have the best relationship with my mom, quite frankly, my whole life, because she was my domestic abuser. My whole childhood into my adulthood. So I was always put down, told that I wasn't going to be anybody. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't pretty enough. There was a lot of things. So then I end up marrying this person, but I'm accomplishing things, right? I'm accomplishing things in my career. I'm hitting the mark. I believe that I'm a good mom. I'm doing all these things, but I was suffering, inside. So in 2018, when I was diagnosed with my 2 autoimmune disorders, they are emotional based autoimmune. So people automatically thought that it was because of my dad's death, because I was so close to him.
Closer.
But if you recall, 2015, it was 10/13/15 was when he passed away. I found out February of 18 that I had Hashimoto.
Oh.
However, in 2017, I knew there was a problem, right? Because I was symptomatic. I just couldn't figure out what it was. I thought it was hormonal. Because when you have a kid, your hormones change and your body's different. So, we were trying to work that out. I tried various things, different eating. I kept gaining weight and just gaining and gaining and gaining. And since then, I've lost a person, like at least 185 pounds. Because once I had my diagnosis, then I could make changes, right? Now I know what's wrong. And now I know how to fix this. But the emotional part was not because of my father. Part of it was, of course, I miss my father every day of my life. Every day I wake up, and I think of him. However, it wasn't that. It was being stuck in this marriage where I was, just being abused. Here I'm the main provider. I take care of everybody in our household, including our child, his child, which was from a different relationship. So I had a stepkid, dogs, I'm paying for everything. And so when I finally asked him to leave, which was late August of 2019, I had $200 left in my bank account. That was it. All the years I worked, on all these FDA approved drugs, all the time I put in. My kid's 9.5 now. I'm 46 years old. So, I worked, to be able to get myself financially stable before I had a child, should I decide to have one. So here I have this child.
You have $200.
And I only have $200. And so when I asked him to leave, that was on a Sunday morning at like 3 a.m. when he finally came home from racing again with his friend. And I filed for sole legal primary custody that Monday morning, which was the first day of first grade for our child, because I knew I had no legal protection. And even though I'm the parent, and I've been the primary caregiver for our child, technically, legally, he had the same rights I had because we were married. So I went and I filed the paperwork right away. Thank God I'm a paralegal. So, I was able to pull some resources and get my paperwork done without an attorney because I couldn't afford one. And my filing fee was $180. I had to pay the $180. So I paid the $180 and I have $20 left. I've got to drive back home. I don't have a lot of money left, right? And it's a far distance from the court to where I live. So I'm like, geez, and I'm starting to panic a little bit. How am I going to live? But you know what? I just built myself back up from the ground up. I just kept working at it. And I had to believe in God. I always believed in God my whole life, but I had to give it to him because you know what? I couldn't, you can't affect too many. You've got to just let it go. I kept trying to, you can't do that. You've got to let it go.
Let it go, yes. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the best way out of it as well, just let it be. But do you think that the fact that it's all started with your mom, do you feel like your mom has something to do with it as well?
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting now because you're kind of probably wondering, do I have a relationship with her now?
Yes.
What's happened? So when my father died in 15, she said some pretty horrible things to me, and I was his caregiver, me. And
Really?
and so she said that I hadn't done anything for him and that he was happy every time I went home. And that's not the case. I was the number one for him. He always said that about me to everybody's faces. Like, Chrissy is my number one. I love her. I'm so proud of her. And my dad was tough. Listen, there wasn't rainbows and, chocolate bars here. He was tough on me. But that's made me who I am today. And I'm so thankful for it, and he was a fantastic grandfather to my son. My son misses him, even to this day. And it's been, how many years, 7 years since he passed away. So now my mom, my brother ended up dying this year at 43 from COVID on the books. However, he had congestive heart failure. So you're probably like, wait a minute, 43 years old, congestive heart failure. That doesn't seem right. Well, to normal people, that isn't right. You're right. What happened was he had abused OxyContin for a number of years. When I was pregnant with my son, I figured it out. So think about it. That was 10 years ago that I had figured this out, quite some time, right? And how I figured it out was he had done laundry at my house and had a pill bottle in his pocket, and it was left in the dryer. And on the pill thing, it had somebody else's name on it. So I knew it wasn't his, and he didn't need Oxy. So what the hell is going on here, right? This doesn't make sense. So of course I say to him, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. And he was working for me at the time. So he was, doing personal assistant work for me for Affinity Bio. And it's like, this just doesn't make sense, right? Like, what are you doing? So he, of course, denied it. And he always had bipolar disease. I knew that he had been diagnosed with bipolar. He refused to take meds for his bipolar disease because he did not like the effects that the meds gave him. So he didn't take those. He took OxyContin instead. So he's one of those statistics, the Purdue Pharma statistics of people who got hooked on Oxy, couldn't get off, and things happened, right? They committed crimes. You know what the statistics say about people who've been stuck on opes. I call them opiates opes. Because it's like, so he was one of those people. And for him, his heart shot apart. So that's why he had congestive heart failure. And I have to tell you, multiple times he was in the hospital. So when he was dying of COVID, the hospital reached out to me because they couldn't find our mother. It's easier to find me. I'm a public person, right? You can Google my name. You find my phone number. Found my phone number, called me. It was a Saturday afternoon. It was January 8th of this year. I get a call from the physician telling me my brother's in the hospital. His heart, when he came in, was firing at 18% capacity. 18. And now it was firing at 8%. They had him on the ventilator. They thought he was improving. They took him off the vent. So, with COVID, once you go on the vent, you come off the vent, you have issues. You can't go back on the vent once you've come off the vent. So, that's it, right? So they had him on a BPAP machine. All of his organs were failing. So 8% for his heart. His liver was failing. His kidney was not working. I think functionality was like 10% with his kidneys. So everything was starting to shut down. So they felt like they needed to talk to a family member or somebody to talk about this stuff so that they could make an informed decision. So that was me. So as I start talking, and, I had been working on COVID since the outbreak back to 2020, March of 2020, I think it was March 29th of 2020, I filed an IND under the Emergency Use Act, so the EUA. And at that time, there was only 285,000 cases worldwide Okay, so this is how long ago I was working on this stuff.
Wow.
So I know a lot about COVID, and I have been advocating for a ton of long haulers and patients that got COVID this whole entire time. So now with my brother, it was like, well, okay, let's run through it. What have you done? What have you given him? Where are we? What are we looking at, right? Obviously, he's an organ failure. And at that time this year, they needed BPAP machines, right? If you recall, the numbers were like,
Very high.
they were very high. And so, we started talking through things and we were running through the meds that they had him on. And the physician tells me that they had my brother on an antipsychotic that's used for schizophrenia. And so luckily I'm a clinical research person, right? So I hear that we run through everything, blah, blah, blah. And I stop her at that one drug and I go, what's that for? Are you using it off label for something? What are you doing? Because, sometimes doctors use things for off label. And I'm sure his anxiety was through the roof,
Right.
knowing that he's dying because he could still hear people, obviously. His brain was still working.
Still working.
So basically, I found out then that he was schizophrenic. So my whole childhood, my whole adult life, I had a sibling that was schizophrenic. My mother didn't even know.
Wow.
So here, the next day, that's Sunday, the 9th, I get a call again, and they tell me that everything is worse. He's really failing. What do I want to do? And it was there's nothing we can do, right? There's nothing we can do. He's not coming back from this. There's nothing we can do.
Nothing.
So we've got to let him go. Like, he needs to go because there's no point in keeping him here any longer. So I had to make this decision by myself, and it's not like I could
you couldn't find your mom.
No, couldn't get a hold of her. Couldn't get a hold of her. Her phone didn't work anymore. There was weird people living in her house. I didn't know who these people were. So if I would drive over there would have been an issue. I had called my attorney and let him know that this is where we were, because in case something happens, I don't want somebody to come sue me later on, because, my brother has 2 children. He has an older child who's now 20 something, mid 20s, but he has a baby who's only 5. So I didn't know if the girlfriend, they were estranged, but who knows? You never know. People get a little froggy. People perceive that I have a ton of money, so let's go after her, right? She's got deep pockets. She's come back from, whatever, right? And so it was a really tough time, So at my brother's, I planned his funeral. I had him. I did have him cremated. We were able to get my mom to sign off on the paperwork because I had the funeral home go drive over there, because he was passed away. I mean, the funeral people have to go take care of this for me, please, because I can't step on the property, because I was afraid that they'll call the police on me, because even though this is my childhood home, I don't know where we are with everything, because with my mom, you didn't know.
Who knows?
So here we are today. My mom tried to commit suicide this March, the 3rd time in her life.
Oh my goodness.
I found out about it because my sister-in-law overheard my mom yelling for help. And so my sister-in-law, I come off Instagram Live for one of the studies I'm running. I have a text message from my sister-in-law asking me to call her. I call her up. She tells me what she hears. I'm like, well, we're going to have to call 911. I'll call 911 because, what if something's wrong? She's yelling for help. Why is my mom yelling for help? This is really odd. So I did. Thank God I have 2 phones. I called 911 on the one phone, kept my sister-in-law on the other phone, because I knew something was wrong, because if she's screaming for help, now I'm worried about legal issues, right? What's going on here? And I've already been worrying, right? Because my brother died in January. Now we're in March. And I had talked to my nephew at one point, where I could see video, through Facebook. And I saw them in the basement of my parents' house. Like, and listen, we were not wealthy. It's a Cape Cod, right? However, it was a nice Cape Cod. Why are they in the basement? So then I hear they're working on an apartment downstairs in the basement. Well, this house isn't big enough and it is not zoned properly to put put an apartment in, right? So I don't know what the hell is going on, right? But I've got to tread lightly here because I just can't come in. My attorney still knew what was going on because I kept telling him, sending emails like, listen, what do you want me to do? So this 911 opportunity that presented itself with me, like where she was calling for help and I have to call 911 now. That's kind of how I got the window in to what was going on. And I found out she was being held against her will, stuck in the basement of my childhood home. Mm-hmm. Yes. So now,
home. Oh my goodness.
My nephew and his best friend. I haven't told anybody this yet. So yep, that's what happened. Mm-hmm. So now I've got to take control, right? Like, got to get a power of attorney. I've got to get these people out of my parents' house. This is my dad. My dad worked for this house. You know what I mean? And he worked really hard. This house was paid off. You know what I mean? Like, what is going on? So there's a lot of stuff that I can't really talk about too much yet that we uncovered. But she's safe. And ironically, it was my sister-in-law and myself that saved her. So,
well, you are not pretty enough, you are not smart enough, but you saved her life.
Yeah. So she's doing much better. She takes her medicine. We got her recalibrated. We got her off stuff she didn't need to be on, so that was good. She went in, in treatment for 30 plus days, got herself straightened out. And, the good thing is that it shows my son that there's some hope, perhaps, with his relationship with his father, because he sees the relationship with my mother and he knows that I had problems with my mom. He saw things as a baby, the way she used to talk to me. So the way she used to talk to me is the same that the way my ex-husband talked to me. So this kid has seen this, you know what I mean? And so now he's like, well, maybe there is some hope for my relationship with my dad because my dad doesn't treat me well either. So, at least it bonds us, where he sees like, you're going to be okay. I came out okay.
You turned out way more than okay.
Things were hard. Nothing was easy, but you know what I'm saying? You can do it. You can do it. As long as you have one functioning parent, you're all right.
Yes, you're all right. But one thing I think you are putting an example for him as well is the fact that some children would have said, that's not my business, and hang up the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Just go take care of their business. That's not my business. Mm-hmm. But you did it. You pick up another phone, you call 911, you get in the middle of it, you get things fixed. I think that's a great example for your son.
Yep. It's doing the right thing all the time. You've got to live with integrity, like that's
exactly
like huge. And even loyalty, and because I'm Italian, my family's Northern Italian and Sicilian. So, loyalty is number one. You're told that from the beginning all the way through your life. That's all, I actually even have it tattooed on my inner arm, DiArc and loyalty underneath it, because, my receiving and giving hands, I have my dad and then, loyalty and love. And so every morning I see these and it reminds me, not that I need a reminder, but it reminds me of where I'm headed. My every day is that I give and I receive. It goes hand in hand.
Yes.
But we live with integrity and we're loyal. And so even though my mom has done all these horrible things to me throughout the years, and we had a little blip, even in the middle of all this stuff, I'm loyal. So I kept moving, even though it was hard. It was really hard. And then I ended up getting COVID this year as a result of all this stuff, because I had to go to the hospital and get a power of attorney. And I had to take control of the situation so that I could get these people out of my parents' house, assess the damage, see what's going on, and work with all the authorities. And so I got COVID early April. And I had it for a couple of weeks. I still have long hauler syndrome. I just did some gut microbiome testing, so I'm going to have that mapped so I can figure out how to fix what's going on, because I had issues prior to COVID, obviously. So I was afraid when I got COVID, because I have 2 autoimmune diseases. So I was afraid that I was going to, go down, for the count. I was terrorized by it. But luckily I was working on treatments, and I have treatments at my house. So that's what I took. And so I made it out.
Well, it's not your time. It's not your time to go down. Not only that, you have to understand your son needs you, and God knows that. And going down is not your time. And also, I don't think you want to go down either, because a lot of people, when they get sick, they pull themselves down. Mm-hmm. They know they're like, just stop everything in their life and just be sick. And that's when things get worse. Even if I have a headache, I would go for a run. As crazy as that sound, I'd rather go for a run than just to take a nap. Because I feel like if I take a nap, I'm telling my body it's okay for that headache to stay there. But I don't want you there. I want you to go away, disappear.
Right. So I agree with you.
So you're fighting, and you're a fighter. You've been fighting your entire life. So, hey, you're not going anywhere, Missy. You're staying right there.
That's right. So
now, let's talk. Go ahead.
I agree with you. I was going to say, I agree with you. Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about your company now. You are the CEO of Spectral Analytic Precision Telemonitoring.
Yep. We call it SAPTM because it's faster. So Spectral Analytics Precision Telemonitoring. So that's why you see SAPTM. And that is, I love this. I love what we've created. So and I'm not saying that because I'm the CEO, but when everybody was complaining during COVID, we were building out the electronic data capture and the electronic patient monitoring. So what basically we could do is run clinical studies through a portion of these enterprise. Then the other side is perpetual telemonitoring. So we built in this perpetual telemonitoring so that patients that are wearing the watches, so whether it's Garmin, if it's Fitbit, if it's Apple, whatever, these all will port into our telemonitoring system. Ooh. So this is the first time ever that patients actually can be monitored by their physicians based on labs, based on their watch, based on their exercise, what they're eating, the noise levels. All those things are so critical, in my opinion, to understand about a patient. And I say this because from my clinical research background, I realized, right around when we found out my dad was dying, that I really didn't know anything. What I mean by that is I really didn't understand the patients like I thought, okay? We all understand therapeutic areas. We all understand various side effects patients can suffer based on disease state. But what we don't understand is really what's going on with the patients because they are not verbalizing it to researchers. Why would they be telling us anything? They don't have access to us, right? They don't even know how to find us. We're trying to build a protocol to do a clinical study on a therapeutic area that, we may know some things about it, but do we really know? And so when my dad was passing and all this stuff was going on and we were trying to work with all these physicians and I was in the center of this with my father, my eyes were wide open then. And I really realized I don't know everything. I may have worked on, at that time, I don't even know how many FDA approvals. So far, I'm up to 25 drugs and devices that I've worked on in my career, FDA-wise. So I've been doing this a long time. But did I really understand diseases as well as I should have? No. And so when I opened up the nonprofit and I started advocating for these patients, originally cancer, and then we expanded, and then we got into the cannabis sector because I was a keynote for Relay for Life for cancer, and a grow processor out in the West Coast heard my speech and was like, we want her because she wants to help people. She's not one of those pharmaceutical executives that's all about the guap, all about the money. No, I have bills to pay. We all have bills to pay. But we are here to do good science, and we are here to help people, and we're here to think about them first before we think about ourselves. We are number two. They are number one. So that's how I got into the cannabis sector. And once I got into the cannabis sector, then I started working into all these different therapeutic areas. So that's how I started to understand patients. That's why I said to you earlier, I understand COVID really well because I had all these long haulers coming to me. It was before I had COVID. When I got COVID, okay, I had the BA5, which now has varianted and mutated and now is an Omni variant BA5, which my BA5 was terrible. I can only imagine what it's like now with the Omni. It's got to be horrible. Pardon me. But that's how I learned everything, right? So this diabetic neuropathy study that I'm working on, my nonprofit, Affinity Patient Advocacy, was talking to these patients and recruiting them, pre-screening them, listening. That's what the telemonitoring system does, is it supports the patients. It puts the power back into their hands.
Wow. So when you say that the doctors can know everything, does that mean that from the watch, it does some kind of connection between the watch and that goes to the doctor?
Yes. So it's a portal. So we built a portal. So it's a portal that goes back and forth to central labs. It goes back and forth. It collects the data per the patient. The doctor's hooked into the patient. We're not trying to replace the doctor. That's not our job. The patient hooks into the doctor. That's their doctor.
Oh.
They hook in. So it's like a connection. They're together. The EMR gets mapped into our system. So then we could see the full electronic records. The patient can see everything. The doctors can. The watches can fire messages from the bots that we have that sit on the platform. So I have AI bots. One's called Canabot. One's called DoctorBot. Canabot for cannabis, DoctorBot for traditional pharma patients. So the bots come out and they'll say, for example, if there's a patient that's a stressed out situation and their heart rate's up, the noise is too loud, whatever's going on, O2 stats, oxygen isn't doing well, we can fire messages from the bot to the watch to tell the patient to take a breath, what's going on. But meanwhile, the doctor gets the alert. Yeah, so the doctor now can't pretend that they don't know what's going on because
this is awesome.
Thank you.
You mean like you can send a message to the watch, to the patient to do that?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That can be life-saving,
Absolutely. And then think about like clinical study wise. So here you have a patient coming into a trial who's having a heart attack. You as a doctor now know they're having a heart attack before they get there. So you're getting an alert saying so-and-so, and everything is randomized, just like clinical studies, right? So they get a randomization number, 3 numbers, and their initials. The doctors know who they are, but we don't, right? Because of HIPAA, there has to be a barrier. So if you think about my clinical research experience, we just shifted it over here to the telemonitoring side. So we consent just like we do on the clinical trial side. We do it over here too, and we randomize. So everybody's blinded. So I don't know it's you. I don't know if it's my neighbor.
Privacy. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So the only one that knows is the doctor that knows. Correct. This is the patient.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. So how do the patient get that device?
So we already negotiated data transfer agreements with Apple, Fitbit, Garmin. So they're automatic. They're already negotiated. So all the patient does is they activate their watch into our telemonitoring system. And then once it turns on, all the data starts to flow because we already negotiated an overarching agreement with these suppliers. So they know to do the transfer to us.
So pretty much the patient get it from the doctor.
Yeah. So like I bought my own Apple Watch, right? So my Apple Watch is hooked in to our telemonitoring system because I'm a patient. It's the patients that bring the watch. Eventually, what we'll do is we'll offer an affordable watch for patients that they can buy that's cheaper than the Apple, the Garmin, and the Fitbit. There's a deal we're working on with another watch that's very similar to all these, that's low cost for the patients, because our whole goal is to make it affordable for patients, to help put power back into their hands so they understand what's going on. And they can then talk to their doctor in a more educated manner. Also, the doctor can talk to them. So when the doctor says, Susie, have you been sleeping? And Susie's like, yeah, kinda. I get like 6 hours of sleep. Well, Susie, I can see from your telemonitoring report that you're getting 2 hours of deep sleep and 3 hours of light sleep a night. So that's 5 hours. 5 hours isn't sufficient. So you see, why can't you get more sleep? What's going on? So then we look at the time prior to sleep, during sleep. What's going on? Is there noise? What's going on? What is going on that this poor person can't get their sleep?
Sleep.
Because sleep is essential.
Exactly. So is there an app between these two also, the monitor and also the watch? Something that keep the database of everything?
So everything sits in our telemonitoring portal. So once you log in as a patient and you synchronize your watch with us, everything sits there. So your lab results, your doctor visits, we could do telemed visits through our system with the doctor and the patient. The patient can schedule it directly in the system as well. So it gives them more control, and all the reports and everything are there for those patients.
Wow, you put a lot of work into this.
I did this. Yep. And I was doing this all while everybody was complaining about COVID. I was working on this quietly and then running these two programs and COVID at the same time. I ended up working with the White House. So I was working with Trump and the administration on a treatment. And in all my career, I've never worked with the administration before. I've worked with the FDA, NIH, DOD, those types of federal organizations, but never have I worked with the president before. So that was interesting,
Yes.
It was like, wow,
But that's because you are doing something great. Imagine that, COVID, everybody was sleeping and you up all day, all night,
yes.
making the impossible possible. Okay, yes. That's what you are doing.
Thank you. And we were one of the ones that got hacked. We're the ones who broke the story to the White House, because when I did my submission into the FDA website, it's called CEDAR. That's what the platform's called. When I did my submission, it gave me a number back, right? And it was 149296. I have a photographic memory, so I remember things. And so the FDA can't find my submission, but I have a receipt from their portal that says I submitted. So I'm like, what's going on here? So I'm on with the help desk of the FDA. There's 11 people on the Zoom, right? They're all looking at my computer. They're like trying to find it. Can't find it. They can't find it on their side. But I have a number. And I have a receipt from them. So clearly I submitted it, right? Like I didn't make this up. I did. And I remember exactly when I did it. It was, like I said, it was March 30th. So I know. So we had one of our tech people. Luckily we have high level tech people. They found the Trojan virus that the Chinese, when they got into the FDA, put on my filing because it was a treatment. So they had a bot that was looking for submissions that said treatment. So remember I said I have bots, so I understand this stuff, right? So when I made my submission that it was COVID treatment, because you had to put that in there because it went into the EUA, the Emergency Use Access, you had to use that nomenclature. So when I used it, they found it immediately. The bot picked it up, and in came the virus. So the virus sat on top of my filing. That's why they couldn't find it. So we had the Trojan code and everything. So it got that contractor that we hired to do this sent it into the White House, because they work with the White House. They used to. And so they sent it in, and that's how that all started. So that's how we figured out it was the Chinese. So when that news report came out and they mentioned the other countries and China, we were the ones who broke it first to the government.
Wow.
FDA didn't even know they had a problem. They had no idea.
Oh my goodness. Sometimes I wonder, how did they even get there in the first place?
Well, because they were smart enough to have a bot sitting there waiting for us as pharmaceutical people to put those protocols in. So later on, I saw a study come out with one of the drugs in China, because my first submission was a combination of two FDA-approved drugs that were opposites of each other. But when you put them together at higher dose, within 4 days, it dropped the viral load. 4 days, boom, gone. So they took one of the drugs and did a study, supposedly, and you needed the other drug to help affect the change. That one drug wouldn't do it alone. We knew where they got the information from because they stole from me. So here they took, and they published a paper about one of them that there's no friggin' way that stuff would have worked to drop the load, the viral load by itself. It didn't. It wouldn't work.
Wow. So you stay up all night long and you almost didn't get credit for anything.
Exactly. And we got stuck. We couldn't move forward with the FDA because it was an election year.
That's...
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. That was like not your lucky day, your lucky time at all.
It really wasn't. And then, so that's why we were building what we were doing in the back end and still trying to move stuff forward, with the studies and everything else. We were kind of working hand in hand with everything in one shot. And then advocating, because I had all those patients rolling in through Affinity Patient Advocacy, and we do that for free. We don't charge any money. So we're working around the clock, helping people. They were trying to kick people out of their apartments and all this stuff. And we were getting involved in that, trying to help people stay in their apartment, all this stuff. We were doing all kinds of things for people. So it wasn't just true patient advocacy, like healthcare solutions. We were doing legal things. We're doing all kinds of stuff because we're lucky enough to have people in our board that have all these various skill set. So, we were able to help all these people.
You did a lot for COVID. I feel like you did a lot for COVID you didn't get credit for.
I thank you for that because I feel that way. Like, it's like, even now, like when people talk about COVID, I'm like, this is true. Like, this is all true. We knew that there were 20 variants 2 years ago. We knew there were 20 then. Now they're dribbling out and everybody's surprised. And it's like, no.
It's been there.
We knew about this 2 years ago. So I don't understand what hell happened, but whatever. It's just annoying. And then like now people don't think they have to wear a mask. And it's like, you understand we're still in COVID, right?
It's just the fact that it's not going anywhere. It's staying with us for the rest of our life.
That's right.
But we also need to learn to take protection for ourselves, for our children, especially we don't really know what's going to happen when our kids get older if they had COVID at a young age.
That's right. That's absolutely right. And I don't want to get political with treatments and things, but, I have concern about long-term effects. Effects and things of that nature. I mean, we already know that there's long-term effects on vaccines, and that's not talking about COVID. That was previous vaccines.
Sure, vaccine. Yes. I remember one time I called the doctor to say, oh, your son needs to take the vaccine, which was the flu vaccine. Mm-hmm. Do you want to give it to him? I'm like, yeah, sure, no problem. He can take it. So by the time that I left the doctor's office, driving for 10 minutes, and the iPad fell down from his hand. I'm like, my son not playing with his iPad? Something is wrong. So I pulled the car outside. The kid was burning. And I called the doctor back, said, well, he just left your office. Now he's burning. And I have to turn around, take him back. And then they have to give him antibiotic. So she apologized by saying that they'll call me 2 days later. There was an issue with the vaccine that he just took. That could have killed him.
Right, exactly. What do you mean? You just calmly call me up 2 days later and tell me there's an issue? I already knew there was an issue because I had to bring him back because he was burning up. and he almost passed out in the back of my car.
Yes. So it's kind of like since then when I take him to the doctor office, and doctor knows she knows not to ask me anymore. Do you think I should give him the flu shot? I look at the doctor with my face like I'm about to kill you if you even think about giving it to him.
No. Yeah, I took my son for his well checkup, and it wasn't too long ago when I took him, and they of course are ready to give out the flu vax. Oh, can we, what about COVID? And I'm like, you do realize who his mom is, right? I'm like, no. No. He's not taking any of those things because I don't trust it, and if God forbid he gets COVID, I have something he can have that will keep him safe, that I have a lot of clinical data on. So,
no. Yeah, it's the same. I did it when the doctor said a COVID vaccine. I'm like, no, thank you. The flu didn't work too well. I wonder how the COVID we're gonna go into.
Forget
about it. The thing is, I'm worried about is the long term. So I don't know what's gonna happen when he get older, and I'm not going to put my kid in danger. And I'm watching my child die, and when I get older, and it's all my fault because I want it to be just like everyone else. I don't want to be just like everyone else. I'll wait for it until it's happened, and I'll deal with it.
Right. I agree with you. That's a lot of what society does to us as moms, is that we get peer pressure into doing things that we're like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I know my child, I don't want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. And you keep, you keep pushing it, and they keep pushing you back. And then they label you. It's like,
I love labels. I've been labeled. I was born black. That's my first label. You're black and in the back of the line. So,
and a female.
And you're a female. Oh, get way in the back.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. It's not easy.
It's not easy. So anyway, I also wanted to talk to you about Affinity Biopartners. Can you tell us about that company?
Sure, absolutely. So that is a clinical research organization. So we get hired by biotech companies to run clinical studies and design things. And so one of the ones that's out there right now in the press is the DN study I brought up, where we were hired to develop the protocol, work with the regulatory authorities, identify the clinical trial sites, get the patients in, follow them, spectral electronic data capture and electronic patient-reported outcomes is being used in that trial. So we're running that so that we can collect data in a formatted fashion that could be submission ready from a regulatory standpoint. So our job is to always be up on the regulatory factors, but also truly understand the patients that we're trying to help, right? So Affinity Biopartners works with the nonprofit Affinity Patient Advocacy. They work hand in hand. And then the tech firm works with us to supply the technology that we need to help find the patients, to get them into the clinical study through the EDC. That's where they consent in that way, separate from the telemonitoring, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. But also, I think you have an AI health outcomes, right?
Yes. So that company was where I originally started the bots, Dr. Bot and Canabot. So what I did with that company was, why would I need two tech companies opened at the same time? When I started Spectral with one of my partners, who I work with every day now, who's my chief financial officer for the Affinity companies. So I took the technology and transferred it in for at least the bots, the EDC side, like the framework, all the written stuff. I already had that, right? So I just brought it over. So that's why we got up so fast with Spectral, was because we had pre-existing intel and intellectual property.
So now, with all of these companies, how do you manage it all? We're not even done yet. That's just one of them.
it's you know what? It's well, I recently found out in July that I am Spectrum. So I didn't know this. I always just thought I was weird, like certain things. I get bothered by noises, like loud noises. Don't like it. Don't like bright lights. I eat food when I want to eat it, and a certain kind of food when I crave it. I can't eat food 2 days in a row that's the same. It's just, there's these things I have, right? And everything has its place. I don't like people in my space. Like don't, I do well speaking, like you've seen some of my things where I can just walk up on the stage and speak to, hundreds of people, no problem. But don't put me down in the pit with all those people because I don't like that. I don't like that. No, I don't like that. And so I took, and I've worked on autism. And my nephew on my sister's side, he has Asperger's. So, and we were trying to figure out where he got that from. And today is his birthday. He turned 21. So, and I was there when he was born. And so I know it's dating me, but he's 21 now and he's my favorite nephew out of everybody. And so I took a test and I figured it out. But yep, I'm spectrum. So now it's like, oh, well, this makes sense because the photographic memory, right? Like I see things in my head, and when I meditate, I can come up with ideas, business ideas that I didn't think were possible. Like some of the things that I'm doing with my brand, this is all through meditation. Like it's like the third eye opens up and I'm like, oh, yeah, we could try this and see if this could blah, 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 And so it's how my brain works. I know it sounds weird, but it just kind of...
It's not sound weird at all because a few things that you said, I'm kind of similar to them. Not all of them, but I like my space to be a certain way that I like them to be. And then when you talk about loud noises, there's time I'm okay with loud noises, but there's time don't even get close to me because I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, no, my son's the same way. So he and we get along really, really well because he has a lot of the same tics as I have. So I understand him really well because I'm that way, and so when I finally figured out label wise what it was, then I called his dad and said, listen, I want to get Christian tested because I just tested and this is what I tested for. And, and by the way, all these things that, I told you that I couldn't help, like I don't like people in my space. I don't like this. I don't like that, blah, blah, blah. And you used to criticize this thinking I was a mean person. I was controlling, tell everybody I was controlling all the time. It wasn't controlling. It was because this is who I am and this is the way I am. I don't purposely try to be this way. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
I don't purposely try to not include people. I just don't like them. Even my own father, when he used to visit me in Cali, and I love my dad. I mean, come on. After 2 days, I'm like, he's got to go.
You need your space. You like your space.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that was my dad. So it was like, and I used to try to explain myself and I'd over-explain myself and I'm defending myself all the time. And so, I'm like living this way. And this is ridiculous when I love you for who you are and you're not perfect. Why can't you love me the same way?
But why do you have to change? That's
right.
Who you are. That's the way you are. I think that for me, I looked at it. If someone loves you enough, they should be able to understand you and live with you the way you are. You don't have to change anything. The moment you have to start changing, there's a problem. Then you are not you anymore. You are someone else.
That's exactly right. So, so when I figured this out, it was like, oh, well, this is fantastic because you know what? If I can help people now with autism feel better, feel empowered, feel like, hey, listen, it's okay to be me. I love me the way I am and just do what I do, then so be it. That's just the way, that's my magic. That's my magic. So that's why I can do all the things I do. To be honest with you, it's just how I'm wired. I'm really wired that way. And it's hard because I do have brain fog, right? Because I have 2 autos and I have long hauler syndrome. So I do have brain fog every once in a while. So I repeat stuff to myself so I can remember things like little things I forget, right? Like dumb things, like chore-based things I forget. But major things, for the most part, I always remember. But like I say, like when I forget, I'm like, listen, I'm sorry, I forgot. Like I don't hide it. I forgot. But
I think we all forgot things, don't we?
We all forget. Nobody's perfect, but it's like when you're in a woman CEO role, and I'm typically, my job is held by men. right? Clinical research. Who are the leaders? Usually they're men, right?
Men.
Tech.
Men.
I don't even have a programming background, but I tell them exactly what needs to be done. And when something's wrong, I always know. And it's not me being egotistical. It's not. It's just that I know it's not working. This isn't firing the way it needs to be. I don't know the technical reasons, but I know it's not working.
Something
is
wrong.
Why. Mm-hmm. And I can explain why I know why it's not working, but I don't know how to fix it. So then I say, listen, this is what needs to be fixed. I know it's not working. 9 times out of 10, I'm right up on the money, like with my assessment.
But you know one thing? When it's come as women, for some reason, when something is wrong, our gut feelings always tell us, and then most of the time we are right. And we're always right about the things that other people don't even realize it's happening. For us, we already know. Let's say, for example, your husband is cheating. Mm-hmm. You don't have proof, but for whatever reason, your gut tells you this is happening. Mm-hmm. And even if you go to him, you're like, oh, no, you're just crazy. I'm not cheating. How did you come up with that? Until you prove it.
Yeah.
Oh. But you already know. I don't know why us as women, we are like that, but it's just something like, it's always click. It's like something is wrong here. No, that's not it.
Absolutely right. And I used to diminish my gut instinct because, just like you said, when I would bring things up, oh, you're crazy. That's not happening. This isn't happening. Da, 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 da. Meanwhile, I'm getting emails. I'm getting things sent to me because they can find me. These people can find me. I'm a public person. And that was before I am who I am today, you know? Even back then, because of my work in biotech, I was always, you know, and I've been a CEO since 2010. So you can find me if you want to find me. Anybody can find me. So these people were finding me, and it was proving what I felt. But yet you tried to make me feel, you gaslit me and made me feel like I was a crazy person. When in fact, I was right on the money.
Yes. And I don't know why. It's just something. I wish that more women will go with their gut feelings, because for whatever reason, our gut feelings usually right. It's right.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. Like, you've got to go with your gut, you know, because your gut is always right. If something doesn't feel right, listen to your gut. Don't try to overpower it from up here. Listen.
I agree.
To your gut.
I agree. But also you have a podcast. So now let's talk a little bit about the podcast. Can you tell us more? How did you get started with that podcast in the first place?
So the podcast, I'm really proud of the podcast, because when my team came to me and said, you know, through the brand, it's time. You're ready. I'm like, ready for what? You're ready to shoot your own podcast channel. You've been on the other side so many times. You're really good at it. You're going to be good on the other side. And I'm like, no, I don't think so. I really don't think so. I don't think I'm that interesting. And they're like, no, you really are. Like, you really are. You can do this. Let's try it. And so last June, so it was a year and a couple of months now, I launched my first podcast. And I was like, okay, well, if you say so, we'll try it out. And so we did. We shot the first one, and I was nervous, you know, and then I brought on guests in the beginning that I was already aligned with and I knew really well. So I felt comfortable, just like talking to you today. I feel comfortable talking to you. Like, I'm not nervous or shy. And so I kind of like taught myself, like, through the first couple, how to do this, right? And then I get feedback from my team. They tell me things to improve upon, but we're non-scripted. So when we show up non-scripted. So we talk about whatever it is that, you know, we're here to talk about. It's always to talk about my guest and what they've done, whatever it is, right? But one of the main components of the podcast is to show people that we are the same. So every podcast I close with, I thank my guests for being on. And I thank the people that view us or listen to us, because you can do it, you know, either listening or viewing. And then I say, remember, we are the same. I am Christina DiArcangelo. And that's how I end it every time. And so you'll see me hashtag all the time. We are the same. We are the same. We are the same. Because if people think about this, if people understand that there's something about them that makes them the same with other people they meet along the way, think about how much nicer this world will be. Like you and I have things in common, right? When we first met, we knew we had things in common, right? That made us the same. So that's what we try to do on my show, is to show people that we have something in common, that we're always the same. So every guest that's on, there's always something that ties back to me as a human. But we also teach lessons. So my goal is always to teach something, whatever it is, believing in yourself, always getting up, various things, depending upon the topic. I've had artists on my show. I've had jewelry designers. I've had makeup designers on. I've had doctors, on, lawyers, regulatory people, self-made CEOs. I had a transgender on talking about she's a woman. She transitioned from a man to a woman, and she talked about working in cannabis as a trans, but also, her brain's wired as a man, but she's a woman. So this was interesting to have her on, because we got to talk about all those things that not a lot of people want to talk about. I'm not afraid to talk about these things, because you know what? My goal is to help people feel better. Again, remember, we are the same. So I might not be a transgender. However, I'm a woman. She's a woman. We both work in cannabis. We both have held positions that males normally hold. So, you know what I'm saying? So with that episode, it was easy to see very quickly where the parallelism was. I had one of my friends on that I've been, I've known since 2005. He knew me when I was this firecracker working on the West Coast. I was one of the youngest heads of outsourcing in the entire pharmaceutical industry at age 30 globally. That's when he met me. So I was tough. I was really tough then, because, you're talking about millions, MMS. So, and I was responsible for negotiating all the deals, getting the best pricing, making sure we stayed Sarbanes-Oxley compliant. All those things, working with the C-class team, and I'm 30 years old. So I met this gentleman and we became friends, and he was from the East Coast, obviously, and he was visiting on the West Coast when I was working up there. And just recently, he published his second horror book. And so I had him on to talk about his horror book, but obviously we talked about how we know each other. And he knew my father. So he talked about my dad in the podcast, which was unexpected. But it was just so awesome to hear him talk about my dad and his interactions with my dad and why he thinks I am who I am as a human. And so you see how it's somebody I worked with, but we became friends and colleagues. It's been how many years now? And he was on my podcast. So it's like having a conversation like you and I are having right now. This isn't scripted. It's the same thing. So that's what I do with the podcast. And I really, really enjoy it. We've have over 50 episodes that have been shot. We have had 27 countries download my podcast.
Wow.
It's crazy. My Instagram, I am Christina DiArcangelo. Every company has an Instagram: Affinity Bio, APA, Spectral, Avum, and obviously CD has Instagram. My Instagram is now at, I think, 110,000 followers. And I've only had Instagram for 2 years, so a little over 2 years. So I've been really working hard, chipping away at all these things and being vulnerable. The podcast allows me to be vulnerable too, right? I can talk about what I want to talk about because it's my medium platform. The same thing with my magazine, the DiArc.com. It's an e-magazine. The reason why we did that this year, and my head of PR was like, what magazine? When I was like, we need to do a press release on the magazine. He's like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What magazine? And I was like, oh, we have an e-magazine. And we just kicked that out the spring. And so what we do there is it's a lifestyle magazine. So it's what I love in my lifestyle. So obviously patient advocacy, wellness, fashion, jewelry, makeup, cars, advocacy, biotech, tech, India culture, because we opened up Affinity Biopartners India. We just expanded like 3 weeks ago into India now. So we're getting into all these different cultural variances because I've always been culturally diverse since I got in the industry. This is since I've been in my early 20s. My kid's biracial, for God's sakes. I live and breathe cultural diversity. And in my own family, Northern Italian and Sicilian. Same thing.
Yeah, same thing, yeah.
But people look at me and they think I'm just some white lady. And I'm not. I'm not. I'm like, listen, I got some color.
There's some color there. You just can't see them, but they're there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh my goodness, you are doing so much. So you have a retreat in 2023 focusing on women coming together, celebrating each other. Can you share more about it?
Yes. So we delayed that because of the economy, to be honest with you. People aren't spending money right now, and women tend not to spend money on themselves. I don't know how you feel about that, but I know.
That's true.
Okay. I'm happy that you agree because I don't want to overgeneralize that statement, but
no, that's true. We don't.
We don't, right? And this thing is to help women. It's to empower women. It's to help them build their toolbox out even more effectively. So in other words, it's working on personal development as well as professional development. So it's giving women the opportunity to be vulnerable in their skin, to show up as they are without judgment. And it's also to show a variety of women that I interact with in my circle, in my inner circle, because you can imagine based on what I do, there's different facets of all the businesses I have, right? So my bath partner, say, is a local woman, right? She's here in Pennsylvania. But then, I'm doing distribution for our transdermal patch company. And that's woman out of the West Coast. And so basically what we're trying to do is just to show people that it's okay to be who you are, embrace it, and learn to love yourself. Because that was one thing I failed in. I stopped loving myself when I was 21 years old and did not start loving myself again until 2 years ago.
Too long.
That's too long. And you shouldn't do that, right? Look how much better I could have been if I would have loved myself that whole time, Yes. So we want to just come together as a group of successful women from all different walks and industries to come together and join forces and show other women it's okay to be who you are in your own skin.
So I know that you say you moved it to a different date. So do you know when it's gonna happen?
Well, we're kind of going back and forth on this internally. Do we think the economy is going to turn around by springtime next year? We just had elections yesterday, so it's like so. I don't know. We're kind of still hesitant. I don't mean to sound flip about it, but we're still trying to hesitate what we want to do because we want to make it, one, affordable for people. Two, we don't want people feeling badly paying for this, right? Three, we have to pay to do this. It's not free, right? So I have to have a place to have it and food for people to eat, etc. So we're trying to figure out, should we keep it in April? Because that's when we were thinking, end of April, or should we move it to July instead? Because that aligns.
I think July is a good time for a few reasons. And one of the main reasons is the fact that school is closed. So which means parents have a little bit more time. They don't have to worry about the kids in school. It's summertime. So perhaps And especially in summertime, parents usually take a lot of vacation time too. Like maybe the kids also go to the grandparents' house, spend some time there, so the mom have a little bit more time or freedom. I don't know, just an idea.
I think I agree with you. So that's kind of what we're just kind of going back and forth on this, trying to figure it out. Like, what do we want to do with this? So I think it'll probably be, as you alluded to, it'll most likely be July. Because also I want to give enough attention to this. It's October. I don't have enough attention to give to this to launch it in April right now. I really don't, to make this successful. And there's some things I'm working on that I know is going to come out very soon. That's like going to be big things. So I'm kind of like hedging my bets. Yeah, and
you also don't want to put too much on your shoulder as well, because not only you run many different companies, but you're also a full-time mom.
That's right. I'm responsible. I'm responsible for my kid at all times, right? And so I can't, and he's my number one priority, right? So I can't have, I can't not show up right, so to speak. And I want to make sure that when I am doing something, that I'm doing it at my fullest capacity.
Exactly. So I think that's also very important. So what are the challenges women entrepreneurs face in healthcare industry?
Well, one of the things is trying to make sure that people understand that when you bring up something, like when you identify an issue, that you're not being emotional about something. When you find something that's a safety issue, say, or whatever it is, it's not you being emotional. It's you expressing a situation that needs to be resolved. And you come in it with facts. So when you come in with the facts, I don't understand how you could say to me on the other side that I'm being emotional because I found some things that were not properly done. That's not being emotional. So that's just talking like we're talking here. It's like white or black. That's it. Like I don't understand why we're arguing about this. And I'm not being emotional. I'm just explaining to you what's happened. You just don't want to hear it. And that's not my fault. And, I think also just not taking things personally. We as women have a tendency to beat ourselves up, right? And we think, could have done that better. Could have done this. Like even today when we were talking, when I said I came out first from the gate saying, maybe I should have gone to therapy a little bit earlier in my life. I maybe would have been more successful. I admit things that I see in myself too, out there, but it may not be true, really truthful. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, well, wait a minute, hold on. You did fine. You know what I mean? We're very hard on ourselves as women. That's what I'm trying to say. So
yes, we are.
We got to give ourselves a break. We know we're firing on all cylinders and we're performing. So give yourself a break.
I agree with you on that. Any advice do you have for women who want to start their own business?
You can't give up. And it's not easy. It is not easy. People tell me all the time, when I do new things or even now still, I think it's getting better, now because people have seen me, what, I've done. Getting into cannabis, for example, 6-7 years ago now, it's coming up on 7 years that I've been in this space. My traditional folks that I've been working with colleague-wise thought that I had become some bong-smoking person. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you're talking about. And so, I use cannabis as a patient, yes, because I have a program here in Pennsylvania, but it's medicinal, right? So I'm not smoking a bong. I don't consume in front of my child. It's very much like medicine, capsules, like just like you normally would take, so patches, put a patch on, like what's the problem here? So I think really just remembering to stand behind yourself and know who you are and just keep going. Just keep going. People are going to say no. They're always going to say no. But don't give up. Just keep going because it may take you a few times to get to that yes, and you'll get there. But you have to be patient in the process. It doesn't happen overnight.
Discrimination. That's a whole nother conversation.
Yes.
Me and you need to go over. That's something we don't have. A lot of us as human, we don't have that. Yeah,
I agree.
Anything else you'd like to share with us before I let you go today?
No, I think that's it. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for doing an interview with me and showcasing me. I really, really appreciate it. It means a lot, to be recognized for, and that you guys saw the grit. Like you could see behind the scenes. And, you guys have your ways. You can go back and look and see what somebody's done throughout their career to see if they're true or not, and thankfully my stuff is always true. But you guys, you believed in me too. So I appreciate that. So thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time out. And, this is our second time doing this because the first time my computer was glitching. Thank God for the new laptop.
You know what? I think that you are fabulous. You are doing great work. And the number one thing, you put people first. And I think that you don't find that a lot. And a lot of people put, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Before anything else. And that's what's filling our world, our country. And that's what's putting us where we are right now. If we focus on people and if we have more people like you focusing on people, so we have a better chance for our next generation to take that model and then make a difference in this world. And you also, the big thing you are doing, your son is watching. That is the next generation. So I thank you for all you do, and please don't stop until you take your last breath.
Thank you so much. My son said to me last night, I said, Christian, is it tough being my son at times? I want the feedback, from him too, because I'm tough, on him. There's not any baby talk as we talk. That's how I talk to him. He has a really fantastic vocabulary and 9.5 because he's around all these professionals all the time. And the way I talk to him is the way I talk to you, And he said to me, Mom, you were always great in what you did when you were doing your clinical research and your advocacy. He goes, but when you started your brand, he goes, you kind of came into the light, Mom. And so when you did that, now people know who my mom is. And so classmates of mine have come up to me and said, my mom was listening to your mom's podcast. My mom's a nurse. My mom's a stay-at-home mom, this and that. And he goes, so it's a little tougher, Mom, because they look at me and they look at you, and I'm held to a higher standard than other kids in my class because of who you are, Mom. And I keep that in the back of my mind because I always want to make you proud. And I said to him, listen, you'll make me proud with, anything. You just try your best. That's all I expect. I'm not perfect at everything. And I had reading and math issues, and now that's all I do, right? And so I said, just let the chips fall as they will.
Yes. So you see, you are already making that difference. So we will spotlight you anytime, any moment, any second, anywhere. So
thank you so much.
You are opening doors for other women. So just keep doing it because we need that to keep moving forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. You touched my heart. Really, you did. Thank you.